Why is rent falling, and are Canadians actually leaving the country, and which provinces are they leaving from? Hi, Ryan here. So continue from last video, we talked about the current interest rate environment, the inflation factors, and what's contributing to the upcoming rate decisions. And we talked about Stats Canada had an interesting point about inflation, having mortgage rates and mortgage cost and rent going down, right? So this video, we're gonna dive a little deeper to see where the rent is going and what's going on. So let's take a look at the screen. Okay, this article, we can see that Canadian rents fall, but still up to 90% higher in cities. So that means Canadian rents did fall in the recent year. But if you look at the past, like say 5 years, the rent still went up to like 90% higher, almost double in many of the cities. So that's what it means. And if you look at this graph, this is basically the average rent price, the annual asking price for a 1-bedroom apartment, right? In the largest cities in Canada. So the top one is Vancouver and Toronto, right? Obviously, as you can see, the two of the highest rents. And currently Vancouver is at $2,380 and Toronto is at $2,170, right? So Vancouver is still $200 more expensive than Toronto. This is Q1 25. And if you look at this blue line and the green line, so blue line is Calgary at $1,630, Toronto at $2,170. So Calgary is $500 cheaper than Toronto. Montreal at $1,540 comparing to Calgary $1,630. So Montreal is $100 cheaper than Calgary, right? So in the middle, this straight up line, okay, not even moving down at all, like not following other cities' trends, is Ottawa. Okay, Ottawa is the only city that the rent keeps going up and not see a rent correction in the most recent year like the other cities do, right? So that's quite interesting to remember. We talk about unemployment rate, and there is a sector we talk about, the public administration, right? Public services, government jobs, and that's the one that's creating the majority of the job gains in the past few years. So Ottawa being the center of Canadian government, federal government, it is quite possible that the job creation from the public sector is fueling this rent increase and not seeing a correction, right? So that could be an interesting factor to look at. But generally, that's the trend. If you take a look at the different individual cities, this black bar graph is basically the past 5 years in percentage. How much did each city gain in rent price? Okay, and we can see that, for example, the biggest one, Sherbrooke, okay, that's 90% gain in the 5 years. But let's take a look at the bigger cities. Moncton, Greater Moncton on the far east of Canada, 76% 2019 to 2025. In the past 5-6 years, 76% gain. Sudbury, 75% gain, okay? That's a big difference. I know back then what used to rent like a townhouse in Sudbury for like $900, $1,000. Now it's gonna cost you $2,000, right? At least $1,800 to rent that same townhouse. Sudbury is one of the bigger gain in rents. Quebec, 70%. Halifax, 70%. St. John, 64%. You can see a lot on the east end, but a lot of these like smaller cities that's actually having the biggest gain in rent for the past 5-6 years, because a lot of people start to work from home. They migrated from the bigger cities back home to like the smaller cities where they can work from home and not having to stay in the big city while enjoying the better lifestyle, the cheaper standard of living, the cheaper real estate prices, right? That's all like possible. So Windsor, 60%, right? London, 59%. Montreal gained 57% in the past 6 years. And you may wonder, who gained the least? Who gained the least percentage in the past 5-6 years? Unsurprisingly, Toronto, being one of the most expensive rent places, the 6 years rent only gained 9%. Vancouver still gained 27% in the past 6 years, right? And Edmonton only gained 24%, Winnipeg 32%. So these are the lesser ones. But Toronto being at the bottom, it's an interesting one to note. So why are rents going down? Let's take a look at this article. Canadians permanently left in a second highest volume ever. Means Canadians, not like say visa students or visa workers. These are actual Canadians or people with a PR status. They are leaving, right? It's called emigration, not the opposite of immigration. So there's a lot of people leaving Canada. You can see that in 1970s, there's a lot of immigration that happened and people generally like to stay, right? Even after 2001, there's still a lot of immigrations and people generally are staying. It's after 2015 when, I guess, there's some peaks in real estate prices for whatever reason. The most recent, I would say 5 to 7 years, people are leaving at a record number comparing to like the 1965, which is the previous peak, right? And a lot of it also, I guess, technology that allows more workers to be able to seek opportunities in other countries and globalization for our companies, but also kind of the losing of talents because in my view, the difference between Canadian jobs and, let's say, for example, US jobs, right? The difference in the quality of these jobs, in the wage of these jobs, in the career potential of these jobs are diverging the biggest. In the past, let's say, these 10 years, you can just imagine, like somebody 10 years ago or 20 years ago worked as let's say a financial analyst, right? In RBC Bank versus in a bank in the US. There's some differences, or somebody who works in IT, right? But in the past 10 years, if you worked in Google versus worked in like a Canadian firm for like, say same like IT job or programming, you're gonna see a very different career progression, right? So that to me shows why a lot of these like Canadians are actually migrating to other countries, seeking better opportunities, even though we're supplementing that with a lot of new immigrants. But in my view, we cannot compare one-to-one in terms of worker efficiency. Somebody who has been trained and educated, highly educated in Canada and gained to a position where they can seek other opportunities in other countries, the productivity of that person is likely much higher than a brand new immigrant who's just coming here to settle in, right? So there's going to be some lost in productivity if you're just like looking at people as like one-to-one ratio, which they're not in terms of productivity, right? And that's another concerning factor. Where are, I guess, these Canadians going from, right? And here's another chart. So basically you can see that this is the population growth. Canada as a country, our population, is it growing? And you can see the latest data, Q2 25, okay? As a country, we only gained 20,000 people in one quarter. And that's the lowest pretty much ever. Even in like 2025 to 2005, like 20 years ago, we're at 65,000. Even the lowest point was 36,000 and 40,000, and we're only at 20,000, like half of the lowest point. So it's very low. But previous quarters, as you can see, Q4 23, we had 430,000 people, like population growth, right? Because of the previous government policies, we had a spike in number of population growing in Canada, and which caused a lot of problems. As you can see right now, the infrastructure, safety, a lot of reasons why, a lot of like side effects, right, from this like sudden, I guess, unprepared surge of population, right, and that's causing a lot of issues. But right now we have like we return to one of the lowest points in population growth, and Ontario and BC population actually have made a rare contraction, means the population getting smaller for maybe one of the first times, right? The 20,000 gain of people is purely and sheerly coming from Alberta, okay? Alberta as one province gained 20,000 people, and Manitoba, Saskatchewan a little bit, and offset by BC and Ontario. Ontario lost 5,600 people. BC lost like 2,300 people, right? These all sort of offset each other. And Alberta alone had the biggest gain in population. And that explains why Alberta real estate prices has been shooting up, right? But I mean, there's risk in that real estate market as well. If you look at it closely, which we'll talk about in a different video, right? Just investors be mindful if all your eggs are in Alberta, right? But in general, this is what's going on in the population. And combine that with the higher unemployment rate in Calgary and Edmonton, which we saw this from the last video, and just some risks to be considered, right? So in general, we just wanted to share with you some of the latest trends and data about rent prices and immigration, people migration, and job opportunities, employment rates, which we talked about in the previous video. But I think all of these factors are interconnected. So when you're making real estate decisions, make sure you're looking at your city and your region specific economics and also the macroeconomics to make the best decision that can suit your need. And just in case something happens, right, whether our market will be growing better in the near future or getting worse in the near future. Either scenario, I hope you'll be okay. Prepared, so know what's the worst case scenario and how you can protect your downside. Okay, just wanted to share this with you, and until next time, ciao.